Welcome everyone to Fertile Me Live. I'm with the
Hi.
lovely Ashley Howell. We have an exciting announcement to make. Fertile Me Radio is now launched on iTunes, Google Podcast, and Spotify, and wherever else you can find podcasts. You can also just go to fertilemeradio.com, and it's going to, if you don't have iTunes, if you don't have any app that would allow you to listen to a podcast, you can just go to fertilemeradio.com and everything is right there.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
It is. And it's not just recordings from FML. We sprinkle a lot of solo episodes in there, just me deep diving into certain topics. And I think it's going to be a very refreshing podcast from others where it's just a collection of interviews. And the reason we don't do a lot of interviews on the show is because we want this to be actionable. We want this to be strategic because we have this great methodology that has worked for a really long time. And it's different than a lot of other viewpoints out there on the internet. So why introduce conflict and confusion and overwhelm, which is probably why you're listening to us in the first place. Mm-hmm. You're coming here to find information, and you're coming here to find what to do and what not to do. So anyway, Fertile Me Radio, it's here, it's launched. We're super excited about it.
Yay.
So go and give us a 5-star review. We'll really appreciate it.
Yeah, we've already gotten some great reviews, so thanks to anyone who's done that for us.
Perfect. So today I kind of want to switch gears a little bit because we were just talking about how last week we gave you a homework assignment to cut out gluten. Well, and the week prior was cutting out cold and raw foods. So you've taken 2 steps of eating a practically fertile diet now. So I wanted to just check in because I'm sure it wasn't the easiest thing to do. And I've been doing this long enough to know that there are probably going to be 3 groups of people on just like changing diets and everything in general. There's going to be 3 groups of people. There's going to be one group of people who will immediately say, well, I can't do that. There's no way I'll be able to do that. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to cut out gluten. Mm-hmm. Then there's going to be another group of people that will say, okay, well, I'm going to try it out, which is great. But then once after a month, if they don't get like a positive pregnancy test, they immediately stop doing everything and say, you see, I told you that was not going to work.
Right. Didn't work.
And then there will be another group of people who, they'll commit to it and obviously take it and run with it. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're going to really deep dive into nutrition in the next coming up months. And there's going to be things that I'm going to tell you to cut out that you're absolutely going to hate me for. And, I'm kind of doing this now because I want to get ahead of it. I want to give you some ideas on how to stay on track. I want to give you some ideas on how to stay motivated because I'm telling you what works. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to. Like, we're all adults here. If you do not want to cut out anything and you want to continue doing what you've been doing, that is completely okay with me. My job is not to sit here and give you an F, right? Like, we're not like in school. I'm not going to give you an F because you didn't follow my instructions. So I don't really care. I mean, I care, but at the same time, I don't. Like, if you choose not to follow any of my instructions, I have no problems with it. I'm just telling you what works. Right. I'm telling you what works. I'm telling you that this medicine has been around for 3,000 years. So I don't know what's the word? Like, I don't know, what more proof do you want, basically, right?
Right.
It's worked. So when I talk about spleen and liver and chi stagnation, chi deficiency, I mean, this is like knowledge passed down through thousands of years. So anyway, so I want to be ahead of it. I want to help you come up with a plan in case we get further and further into this and you're feeling discouraged and unmotivated because it seems hard. And right. So I want to make sure that we're talking about it now. I want to make sure that you're prepared for it. So, oh, go ahead.
Question. Sorry. Yeah. Well, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but that just made me think to myself, if we're going to talk about like kind of how to start doing it or tips or anything like that, before we talk about the 80-20 rule, which we went over last time, that just made me, I'm curious. So even if you can't do 80-20 right away, is just cutting out more gluten than you have before, like little by little, is cutting out a little bit better than cutting out none? Or is it more like, I know it's not like going into ketosis, but like, is cutting out just a little help at all? Or is it like, no, you've got to do 80-20, or can you step into it?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because with anything, right? Like, do you have to 100% stop drinking cold water and eating cold salads, right? Do you have to 100% stop eating cheese? Or can you go out to dinner and have a good time? Of course, right? Even if you just stop eating bread, that's already a huge improvement.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
But I don't want you to get into this habit of swapping out gluten-free, like bread for bread, right? Gluten-free crackers for crackers, or gluten-free bread for bread. It doesn't work that way, because we talked about it. Just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's wheat-free. You could still have reactions and immune response to grains as well. We haven't talked about grains, but that's still a lot of processed foods, right? Bread is very highly processed, unless you're making your own. I mean, it's still high in carbohydrates too. So, or even pasta, right? Like, if you are used to eating pasta every single day and now you're eating gluten-free pasta, that's better because you're not eating the gluten. But the point is, pasta is still very processed.
Right.
And we'll talk more about that when we get into the processed foods, and I think it'll make a lot more sense to you. But, right, we don't want to swap one junk food for another junk food.
So, like, if you're craving pasta and you're going to do it once every week or couple of weeks, gluten-free pasta is an okay substitution, but not for something that you swap out every day. Like, if you eat a sandwich for lunch every day, don't eat that same sandwich just with gluten-free bread every day.
Yeah. And my concern really is the fact that, okay, so maybe you're gung-ho, you're 90-10, and then you're like 80-20. You're like, okay. And then you're really craving pasta, or, everything that's like gluten breads and crackers and things like that. And so then you're like, well, I'll just allow myself to have a little bit of a cheat. And then before you know it, you're doing 70-30. Before you know it, you're 50-50. And then you are completely going back to your old habits.
Right.
That's what I'm scared of. I think it's completely okay, completely realistic to say, I'm going to have a couple of cheat days here and there. Absolutely. But you just have to be self-aware enough to be able to stop yourself and reel it in when it's time to do so. And I think, which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about is, okay, let me just back up. There's one thing I want to say is that if you're the person that's like, never, I'm never going to give up gluten, it's never going to work. I don't think it's fair that you make judgment before you even try it, right? Like, to say that it's not going to work or you're never going to be able to do it without trying it, I have a huge problem with that, right? That's like, you're, how can you pass judgment on something before you even try it? Just based on your preconceived notions about it. But I think that comes from fear a little bit too. Like, same thing with a person who maybe try it for a week or two and they encounter an obstacle and then immediately it's like, it's not worth it. I told you it's not going to work. I cut out gluten. I'm still not pregnant. It's not worth it. So I think like that comes from fear. It comes from fear that you're going to do everything you can, or you're going to listen to this person you heard on the podcast and she told you to cut out gluten. You tried it. But the back of your head, you're like, I'm going to sacrifice all these things and I'm still not going to be pregnant. So what am I doing this for? Is it all worth it? So, and it comes from that fear. And then also it can be hard when your friend who doesn't have the best diet gets pregnant before you do, and she didn't have to do any of these, cutting out gluten or dairy or whatever. So that's the mindset. I think that needs a little bit of work because a lot of you are feeling that way. I know it.
But listen, what about the other side of that coin where if you just try it, I mean, I'm one of those that says, can't do it. Not even gonna. And I tried it. And then after a couple weeks, I was even like, you know what, I'm going to do this for longer. Because if like one symptom like bloating or something goes away, you're like, oh, if it's doing this for me, maybe it'll do this for me, next. So if you give it a week or 2 or 3 or 4, that may change your mind for you. Just trying it may be enough to be like, something's happening, whether it's helping my fertility or not. My body feels amazing. I have to keep doing this. That might happen to you.
Yep. And then if you decide to still eat gluten, then it's up to you.
Yeah.
Right? Like at the end of the day, we all have choices. So if you're like, I heard what you're saying. I understand the validity of it, but I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to do it. And I'm willing to deal with the bloating and the loose stools and all the digestive issues that come with it.
Yeah. That's
totally fine. And I'm not here to give you an F if you don't follow my instructions. Like, I'm here to tell you what works. And if you don't feel like it's going to work for you or it's not worth it, then don't do it.
Right. Well, the reason I even said that is because we had a comment on our Facebook page that we were talking about earlier. And someone said, listen, I cut out gluten, 80-20 rule on Adrian's recommendation. And since then, I've just kept going because I feel so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that Fertile Me group, which I highly encourage everybody to join, then they start swapping recipes and products and things like that. And so, you may turn out to be one of those people that's like, God, why didn't I do this earlier? That's exactly what she said. I wish I had done this sooner.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it'll work.
Yeah. And not just gluten, with anything, right? There's zero guarantee that if you do all of these things that next month you're going to get a big fat positive. I mean, even IVF is like 30% success. I mean, even with IVF, 33% is on average, right? But the clinics here, I mean, they post their success rates. And it's low for something that you're spending 20 grand on, and you know exactly when it's going to be implanted, and it's still around 33%.
I know. But if you get acupuncture, you can significantly raise your chances, like double them.
Nice
to
plug
60. I'm not kidding, y'all. It's the facts.
Well, and
anyway,
I'm going to toot our own horn a little bit because we do things so much differently here than other clinics, right? We have this methodology that help us to boost our success rate so much higher because, I mean, other people don't even talk to you about your diet or supplements. It's just like, oh, whatever you're eating is fine. And meantime, this person is like drinking ice cold water and eating, cheese blocks every day. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about dairy. And I think it's going to be, again, a hot topic, controversial, there's going to be a lot of feedback about it, I'm sure. Because it's such a big part of, American diet. So, but anyway, so I guess like I want you to be prepared when there's going to be difficulties coming up. Like, and that's why you have to kind of dig into the why. Like, why does it matter? Why did you, for those of you who were like, well, I think I'm going to try it. I think I'm going to do it. For those of you who did that, what was the reasoning? Because maybe you're thinking, well, it can't hurt. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm going to try it for a couple of weeks. If it doesn't work, cutting out gluten has never killed anybody.
Exactly.
Vitamin deficiencies have killed people, but cutting out gluten that has no nutritional value has never killed anyone.
No. And we're not asking you to add anything dangerous to your diet. I said earlier, I was like, it's not like we're asking people to smoke crack.
Well, yeah. And I think a lot of us are, we're still very trusting of our doctors. And not to say that they're not smart and they don't know what they're talking about, but a lot of doctors they don't look at the body from a functional medicine perspective. They don't look at the body holistically. It's very much like, well, there's no, which we know is not true, but they'll probably say like, well, there's no evidence that say cutting out gluten helps with fertility. But can we just reframe that? You stop eating gluten may not be the reason why you get pregnant, but it's the fact that you cut out your gluten and you improved your digestion, you improved your absorption of nutrients, you improved your fertility because you're absorbing better. That's what got you pregnant. So as with anything, maybe you took this supplement, maybe you stopped drinking cold water and that boosted your spleen chi. And then from that, it, helped with your mid-cycle spotting, and that maybe you have problems with recurrent miscarriage, and the actions that you're taking today had this chain reaction to improve your health, and that's what helped you get pregnant. So the doctors are looking at cause and effect. Gluten does not cause infertility because, right? So that's why they're saying that cutting out gluten, it won't help you. And that's why you hear doctors say your AMH cannot be improved, which we know it's a lie.
Yeah. Well, there's no proof that gluten can help. Cutting out gluten can help you get pregnant. They expect you to believe when they diagnose you with unexplained infertility. Mm-hmm. That's just a crazy idea. That's just as believable as, well, I have an answer for you. Well, I don't have an answer for you. Mm-hmm. Well, which one do you want to believe?
Right.
Plus, when you start feeling better, it helps your mindset too.
Well, and I think that goes back to what we were saying before is don't think of it as I'm going to sign this contract. I'm going to cut out all these foods. At the end of 6 months, I'm going to be pregnant. That's exactly the type of thinking that will keep all of you trapped. That's what's going to bring a lot of anxiety. That's going to bring a lot of depression, because at the end of that 6 months, when that contract expires and you're not pregnant, there's going to be a lot of disappointment, a lot of heartache, but it's because you put that pressure on yourself. It's because you signed this contract that you had no control over. Like, you stop eating gluten, of course, but you have no control over whether or not your body is going to, your body is going to do what it feels like it needs to do first.
Right.
Because now that you stopped poking holes at the intestines can heal. And that's only takes some time. And once they heal, the nutrients can be absorbed better. Yeah. And then that's going to take a little bit more time, because then now your body feels like it's ready to have a child, and then your egg quality improves, and then you get pregnant.
Yeah. It happens in layers. Try gluten and then just keep going. Try something else. Try the nut. Down the same path, but do gluten first, and then do, try some dairy, and then processed foods and sugar, and just keep going until there's not a 100% I'm doing everything right ratio, but there's going to be one day when everything just connects together and you get that BFP, You know what I mean? I mean, it's like weightlifting. It's like you can't bench press 500 pounds on the first day. It comes in layers. You just keep adding and adding and adding and get stronger.
Well, you got to practice.
Yeah.
And right. And again, we're beyond talking about other people and comparing yourself to them, right? If you want to keep comparing yourself to them and so ate crappy and got pregnant, like I'm tired of hearing it. I'm sorry. And I will just tell you that it doesn't matter what they went through. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We've all known people that, we feel, and this is going to sound bad, but we all have people who we feel.
I can't hear you.
What happened there?
I don't know.
I got muted. What?
I thought Facebook was bleeping you out.
And I can't hear you.
You can't?
No. Oh my goodness. Are we having issues? Sorry, guys. We're having some technical difficulty. How about now?
Can you hear me? No, I can't hear you.
Can
now I can't hear you.
I can't hear you though. It's like your mic is not working. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Keep going.
Why can't I hear you?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. Okay. Well, Ashley, let me kick you out and then you come back in, okay?
Okay.
All right, I've removed Ashley. Let's see if she can come back in. Bear with us. So sorry about this. Who do we have? Who is watching right now? There's no way for us to tell who it is.
Hi.
Okay, it's working now. What happened? That was the weirdest thing.
I don't know. I didn't change anything.
Yeah, it just all of a sudden muted me. I'm going to have to edit this part out on the podcast. But anyway, what were we talking about?
I don't know. You were talking, well, obviously, I don't know. You were just talking about gluten, but I did have a thought while you were talking until you remember. Hopefully people who tried to cut out the raw and cold foods, once you try and cut out gluten, it actually, like, eating everything warm helped me to cut out gluten a little bit when I did, because like when you're used to eating a sandwich or something every day and you're like, oh God, but I've got to eat warm food. Mm-hmm. It's easier to cut out gluten and just, I got to eat something hot anyway. I mean, because then besides pasta, if you can eat meat and vegetables and stuff like that, and it's easier. So those kind of go together.
Definitely.
People can hear both of us.
Hey,
Elizabeth.
I was just saying that, I know that people don't want to admit this, but behind the scenes, behind closed doors, a lot of us all have feelings about certain people that quote on air quote don't deserve what they have, right? We're humans. We're going to be opinionated. So my point is, who cares, right? Whatever they want to do is whatever they want to do. Has nothing to do with you. What they eat, what they put on their body, what they put in their mouth has nothing to do with you. Just like who they chose to marry has nothing to do with you. Because, right? Your choices have nothing to do with one another.
And it doesn't mean other parts of their lives aren't not easy or real shitty.
So do you remember that story I told about Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos?
Yeah.
Like this guy was so amazing, and Zappos is an amazing company, and he's like a gajillionaire. He sold his company for billions, and on the surface you're like, wow, this guy is so much fun. He's constantly going to parties, and he doesn't have to worry about money for the rest of his life. But he died because he was suffering from depression for his whole life. Who knew?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he had a really difficult, on the surface, everything was good. Like, all the money and whatever, right? And, but he was miserable. And that what drove him to make a series of bad decisions. And that was the reason why he was hanging out with the people he was hanging out with. And that was the reason why he decided to experiment with some weird smoke inhalation thing. And that's how he died. Mm-hmm. And his friend Jewel, the singer, Jewel.
I know Jewel.
Mm-hmm.
Good old Jewel.
Yeah.
Can't hear you now. I can't hear you.
This is so odd.
I can hear you now.
Ugh.
Tell me about Jewel.
This is...
Maybe it's just us, because apparently other people can hear us. Go ahead, Jewel.
No, I mean, she wrote this whole article about how she was really concerned for him because he was surrounding himself with the wrong people. But anyway, So my point is, on the surface, everything was great, but behind the scenes, he was suffering. He was absolutely suffering. So I think if all of us could just, it kind of got off on a tangent because we're, didn't mean to talk about this, but I really, really dislike it when people are coming to me and they're like, I just don't see the point because why do other people so-and-so ate crap and why, how come I have to do all this and they don't?
Right.
And
not supposed to have to, I'm just supposed to be able to do it.
I have no answer for that. I'm sorry. Other than why are you worried about them? Right? You're here now. This is your path. These are the issues that you're faced with. And what are you going to do? Nothing. You can't, you deal with it. There's nothing you can do. Like, don't worry about, it's not like you can rewind the back 10 years, right? I hear so many people like, if I just knew birth control would put me in this position, I wouldn't even take birth control. But how would you have known 10 years ago? How would you have known? Yeah. Oh, well, we'll talk about birth control.
Yeah, and you've had so many different combinations in your own life than other people's combinations. That's another thing that I really respect about Chinese medicine and learning this from you, Adrian, is, you have a medical history and stuff, but that's just basically like what you've been in and out of the hospital for, if you've had any surgeries with Western medicine doctors. But when you talk to Adrian, she's going to ask you stuff that's happened your whole life. Where have you grown up? What kind of sports did you play when you were a child? How did you eat when you were growing up? What was your stomach like? And it's just like, whoa, like a doctor's never asked me this before, like that far back. Oh, you were a swimmer? Oh, well, that can contribute to, there are a lot of things that contribute to the way that I am right now because I did them a long time ago, good and bad. And so there's no telling what other people have done in their lives. It's it's just, you can't compare. It's absolutely impossible.
And I think that's why sometimes people like it when I tell them my imperfect stories, things that happen at home sometimes, because they were like, oh my God, you ate pizza? Of course, right? Behind closed doors, I'm just like anybody else. I have my struggles too. But anyway, got off tangent. But so I just wanted to keep addressing that because if I can just help one person to change that mindset, that I no longer care about what other people did or do or what they're doing. I only care about me and my life and what I have to do to get pregnant. Then I feel like I've done my job. But
so that's a huge obstacle for gluten. Obviously, what you've said is not wanting to do it because other people haven't had to, thinking that you shouldn't have to. It's too big of a sacrifice when this should come naturally. So that's a big obstacle. What are some other obstacles that people face when cutting that out?
Well, I think it's convenience. A lot of foods that are processed and have gluten, it's convenient.
Yeah, for sure.
It's on the go. You grab a wrap, you grab a sandwich, you're on the go. The American diet's all about convenience.
Yeah, and we're busy. We're busy people, so it takes planning.
There's a reason I don't cook Chinese food, because it literally takes me 2 hours just to chop up everything. Mm-hmm. It takes preparation, takes lots and lots of, the traditional Chinese meal has 1 soup and 3 entrees, right? Everything's eaten in family style.
Right.
So, that takes a lot of time to cook. And they're all balanced. There's a veggie, there's a stir fry. You can't have 2 seafoods. You got to have seafood and then maybe a chicken and then a pork. And then you can have a soup.
And it's so funny because I'm always like, what? If you've got 1 meat, why do you need another? It's 3 of them. And she'll be like, oh, yeah, I made some kind of dinner this weekend. I'm like, what'd you have? She's like, braised short ribs, some kind of fish, vegetables, this, that. And I'm like, did you have a dinner party? And she's like, no, it was just us. And her daughter's 9 years old. And I'm like, what's all that food for?
Yeah. And that's exactly, but that's Chinese cooking, right?
Yeah.
So that's the style. So that's not convenient. That's, you can't just grab and go you probably could, I'm sure the lifestyle is very different in China now. I'm sure they could go down the street to a cart and get a little to-go box of 3 things, maybe with a soup or something, like a bento box.
Right.
So a bento box. So,
but I wouldn't mind never eating gluten if for every meal, I had pork, fish, beautiful broccoli and asparagus and something else, but you don't.
But you can, right? What's wrong with a piece of steak with Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes?
Yeah, no, it's great. That's what I'm saying. But you've got to plan. You've got to plan to be able to do that during the week.
And I'm glad you said that, because I have it written down somewhere that I have to talk to people that if you don't plan, you're not going to be able to do any of this. So I'd much rather you say, I hear you, I want to do this, but I cannot do it right now. Right? I have a lot of things going on. I'm in survival mode. Now is not the time to start something new. So I'm going to wait 2 months. That's totally okay with me. It's totally okay. Because there may be other things that you can do in the meantime.
Or I need tools to help me.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can choose not to add ice to your water, right? That's easy. You don't have to do salads.
Right. That was my hardest. I don't use ice anymore, but I used to live for ice. Live for it.
But you also been taking our elixirs for a while.
Yeah.
So that corrected some of your blood deficiency.
Yeah. Are you silent again?
Okay. And now I can catch that. Whenever this message pops up, it tells me that I'm muted.
Oh, what is happening?
Anyway,
that's so weird.
I keep.
Another thing is. So
now I can't hear you.
Oh. I don't know. I didn't get a message. I don't know.
Go back out and come back in.
Okay. So,
Elizabeth, are you still watching us? Sorry about this. It's been kind of a weird day.
Hi.
Oh my God. Such a weird day.
I was just thinking, how weird would it be if that happened in real life? Like, this electronic stuff is just so weird. Like, can you imagine like someone sitting down interviewing someone, and all of a sudden they just go silent and they're like, walk out, walk back in. It's so weird.
Okay.
Anyway.
So I was giving some tips. Okay. So we had to plan.
Oh yeah.
Okay. We had 10 more minutes. So, okay. You have to plan. Number one, you have to plan it out, right? So you have to read your labels. Like, obviously you have to like read the labels and make sure it's not, right. And, the easiest thing to do right now is just to swap out things like pasta, things like crackers, things that we know for sure that have gluten in it for something. Like, for example, I mentioned the sweet potato example. You were talking about this earlier, Ashley, where you're like, well, what if you need carbohydrates? Because
I'm saying, like, what if you're like training for a marathon and someone says, you know, you've got to eat a huge bowl of pasta before you go because you've got to load up on carbs. Like, if someone's really involved in some kind of training lifestyle.
Well, we're going to talk about exercise too, but first of all, there are sports dietitians that make sure an athlete gets the fuel that they need for practice, that get the fuel that they need for post-practice or post-competition repair, because you've torn down your muscle and you have to make sure that you're repairing it. If you're training for a marathon, you should probably put your trying to conceive plans on hold.
That's the catch.
Right, because
our whole conversation. Yep.
Because if you are over exercising, and first of all, that's not going to be good for fertility anyway. But if you're like, well, listen, I have to exercise. I have to run 10 miles a day every day for 7 days. Well, my first instinct would be to tell you to not run that much. But if that's not an option, if you're like, it would literally kill me if I don't do that, then we got to make sure that your nutrition supports your lifestyle. And when you're training and when you're running that much, you probably have to eat like 3,000 calories a day and like 500 grams of carbohydrates. And I guarantee that 99.9% of people cannot do that on their own. If you have like a sports dietitian who's telling you exactly, like they're doing a sweat test after you work out, they like mop up your sweat and they like measure how much you actually sweat to tell you how much water you have to drink. Well, right. Most of us don't have that. And
so you're saying we're probably not eating enough.
We're probably not eating enough, and we're not eating the right ratios.
Yeah, that
right. So if you're running 10 miles a day or 10 miles a day, 7 days a week, and you're not eating, like you're only eating like 1,000 calories, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster, right?
Survival mode.
So if you are able to keep up the carbohydrates requirements I got muted again. If you're able to keep up with the carb requirements for your lifestyle, no problem. Let's try it out, right? Like you have to eat 500 grams of carbohydrates a day, or at least like 250 to 300. I mean, that's like, that's probably like 10 sweet potatoes. And right, like how many of us are actually going to eat 10 sweet potatoes? But if you're not, then I promise that your body is going to go into crisis mode.
Yeah.
So I need carbohydrates. When somebody says I need the carbs, well, we do need carbs, but there are other sources of carbs. Like on any given day, most of us can get away with an apple, some sweet potatoes, Brussels sprouts has carbohydrates, right? You can have, there are other things, like if you snack on some raisins, I mean, that's carbohydrates, right? There are other sources of carbohydrates other than gluten-filled pasta and breads.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Oh, I lost you again.
I figured I didn't come back. That's okay.
Let's just like, maybe like, let's wrap up. And this episode was just so weird. And now Elizabeth, she's probably like, oh gosh, your microphones are driving me crazy. But anyway, that's my point, is that when you really sit down, and I think maybe this is helpful for you. Maybe you first keep a food diary for a few days just to see exactly how much gluten that you're getting in. Because I hear this a lot. People are like, oh, I don't eat that much gluten. And then I'm like, well, show me what you ate.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And through the exercise, they're like, oh, I eat a lot of gluten. Right? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, if it feels overwhelming to cut out gluten all at once, you really could just start with one type of food, right? Maybe this week I'm not going to eat breads. The next week I'm going to cut out pasta. And maybe then I'll look at condiments. Maybe then I'll look at snacks. You got to just do it one step at a time. Again, right? Nobody has ever died from eating gluten. Should we just cut this short?
Yeah, you're back now. Just wrap up.
I can't hear you. All right. So sorry about this. I don't know if this was helpful or not because we keep having issues, but we can always do another episode and rehash this next time. But anyway, let's just cut this short because the mics keep going in and out.
Okay.
All right. Bye.